Usually when we think about our own minds, we have this baseline expectation of absolute free will.
Right, like you're the captain steering a ship.
Yeah, exactly. You decide you want to be productive and boom, you become productive.
Right.
Or, you decide you want to be happy, so you do things that make you happy. It feels like this really simple binary control panel.
It's an incredibly comforting illusion. I mean, we desperately want to believe we are the sole independent authors of every single thought and mood that drifts through our heads.
But then you step into the ancient philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita and suddenly someone reaches over and just yanks that steering wheel completely out of your hands.
It's a rude awakening.
It really is. Because we're looking at a psychological landscape today where our consciousness is actually being hijacked. Krishna makes this radical claim that we are operated by three subtle, entirely invisible forces of nature.
Right, the Gunas.
Yes, the Gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And these forces, they aren't just, mildly influencing us. They are literally binding human consciousness. They shape every single thought, every impulse, and every behavior we have.
Which is huge.
It is. And by the end of this deep dive, you are going to feel like you've just been handed the secret mechanical blueprint to your own mind.
Honestly, it really is the ultimate diagnostic manual for the human condition. And what's wild is how relevant it remains today. I mean, thousands of years later.
Absolutely. So before we get completely lost in that diagnostic manual, right off the bat, if you want to keep exploring these ancient blueprints with us, make sure to subscribe to the Simplified Awakening channel.
Yeah, definitely hit that subscribe button.
And, leave a like and drop down into the comments to share your own reflections on these teachings as we go along. We really do read them all, and we love seeing how these concepts actually land in your daily life.
Because they really do land in daily life. I mean, This isn't just dry theory.
No, not at all. So, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to comprehensively explore Chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Right, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga.
Exactly, the classification of the three gunas. And we aren't just skimming the surface here. We are analyzing it alongside the profound, really razor-sharp commentary of Adi Shankaracharya.
One of the absolute most brilliant philosophers in Indian history.
Unquestionably. But to really set the stage for you, we need to locate ourselves in the architecture of this text. Like, where exactly are we in the Gita right now?
Well, to grasp the gravity of Chapter 14, we really have to look back for just a moment at the massive conceptual framework that Krishna introduced back in Chapter 13.
Right, the whole duality thing.
Exactly. He laid out this fundamental duality, Prakriti and Purusha. So Prakriti translates to nature, or, the field. It is basically everything that exists as matter, energy, thought, and emotion.
Wait, thought and emotion are considered matter?
Yes, and that's a huge point. The entire observable universe, including your own ego and your intellect, all of that is Prakriti.
So literally anything that can be measured or observed.
Precisely. And then on the other side, you have Purusha. And Purusha is the spirit, or the knower of the field. It is pure, unadulterated, formless, observing consciousness.
Got it.
So Chapter 13 basically established our fundamental human predicament, which is that we suffer because Purusha, the pure consciousness, gets tangled up in Prakriti, the matter.
Yeah.
It's a case of mistaken identity on a cosmic scale.
So now in Chapter 14, Krishna is answering the immediate logical follow-up question, like, how exactly does a pure, formless spirit get tied down to heavy physical matter? What are the actual ropes?
Exactly. But ironically, to understand our daily life in these ropes, the text starts with this sweeping, massive cosmic origin story.
Right, the cosmic womb. Krishna talks about Bhagavan's womb being the great sustainer, the Mahat Brahma, and this is Prakriti itself.
Right.
And into this vast cosmic womb of nature, the Supreme places the seed of consciousness, and this union of matter and spirit gives birth to absolutely all things. But I want to pause here for a second. Because a cosmic womb and a seed of consciousness, I mean, it sounds beautiful, but for the listener who might not be steeped in Vedic philosophy, what are we mechanically talking about here?
Yeah, it's a stunning metaphor, and Shankaracharya unpacks it with clinical precision. This Mahat Brahma, this great womb, it isn't like a physical place out in outer space.
Okay.
It is the primordial state of nature. Think of it like a quantum field of absolute raw potential before a single atom has even formed. It's the unmanifested state of the universe.
So it contains all the ingredients for reality, but they're just dormant?
Exactly. Perfectly balanced and dormant.
So it's sort of like the stillness right before the Big Bang?
Yes, it's the pregnant silence. And into this field of dormant matter, the Supreme Being introduces the seed. And that seed is the pure, witnessing consciousness, the knower of the field.
Wow.
And the moment that spark of divine consciousness makes contact with the raw potential of matter, well, the balance is shattered. The matter activates. It begins to swirl and combine and manifest.
And that divine spark gets instantly enveloped by the active materials of nature.
Exactly. From that very first superimposition, from that initial union of the seer and the seen, the entire diversity of the universe springs into existence.
From the highest celestial beings all the way down to, like, a single blade of grass.
You got it.
Which brings us directly to the core thesis of Shankaracharya's entire commentary on this chapter. And this is vital. He argues that true liberation, like ultimate unshakable freedom, only comes from completely transcending these binding qualities of nature.
Right.
You have to get out of the gunas through profound self-knowledge and extreme discrimination.
Because for Shankaracharya, bondage isn't a physical prison cell. You aren't, literally locked in a physical box.
Right.
Bondage isn't epistemological error. It is false knowledge. It is the spirit looking at the qualities of nature, the gunas, and mistakenly believing, oh, that is me.
Yeah.
Therefore, freedom cannot be achieved by just changing your behavior or acting differently. It can only be achieved by knowing differently. You have to realize you are not the machinery. You are the invisible witness of the machinery.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you are walking me right into a massive paradox here, and my brain is already throwing error codes.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Right. If my mind, my intellect, my ego, and the very thoughts I am actively using to process your words right now are entirely made up of Prakriti, made of these natural forces, how is it mechanically possible to step outside of them to achieve this self-knowledge? Like, if the tool I am using to understand the illusion is entirely made out of the illusion, aren't I just permanently stuck in a loop?
That is the central philosophical tension of the entire text. It is brilliant that you're hitting that wall right away, because Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy of non-dualism that Shankaracharya champions, it has a very specific answer for this.
Okay, what is it?
He would say that while your mind and your intellect are indeed made of Prakriti and are therefore technically part of the illusion, they aren't static. They can be refined.
Refined how? What does that mean practically?
Okay, think of the mind like a piece of metal. In its raw state, it's covered in rust and dirt, so it doesn't reflect anything. That's the mind deeply bound by ignorance.
Okay.
But through philosophical inquiry and discipline and right action, you can polish that metal. You can polish it to such an absurdly high degree that it acts like a perfectly clear mirror.
Ah, I see.
Now, that mirror doesn't magically turn into the pure spirit. It's still metal. It's still Prakriti.
Right, it still matter.
Exactly.
Right.
But it becomes so pristine that it can flawlessly reflect the pure light of the spirit back onto itself.
Oh, wow.
And the moment that perfect reflection happens, the ignorance shatters. There's a classic analogy of a stick being used to stir a blazing funeral pyre. You use the stick to arrange the burning logs to get the fire burning as hot as possible. But what do you do with the stick at the very end?
You throw it into the fire.
Exactly. The mind is the stick. You use the intellect to stir the fire of self-knowledge, to burn away all the ignorance. But at the very moment of final realization, the mind itself is consumed by the truth it helped reveal. The tool is discarded once the realization actually occurs.
That is a staggering image. The mind eventually burns itself up in the fire of its own knowledge.
Yeah, it's incredibly poetic, but also mechanically precise.
So as we dive into the mechanics of this mind, I want to give the listener a specific mission. So here is your first listening prompt. As we move forward today, pay close attention to Krishna's exact description of these three gunas.
Yes.
I want you to listen carefully and see which one of these invisible forces you recognize operating in your own behavior today.
That's a great exercise. So let's start by getting very precise with our definitions. Like, what actually is a guna?
Yeah.
In everyday conversational Sanskrit, guna just means a quality or an attribute, like the redness of an apple or, the sharpness of a knife. But Shankaracharya adds a crucial technical note here. In the context of Vedic physics, the gunas are not just adjectives describing a substance, they are the substance.
So they aren't the paint on the wall, they're the actual bricks.
Exactly, they are the primary components of Prakriti. And the word guna also literally translates to rope or strand.
Ropes.
Yeah, and that is exactly how they function. They are the strands of nature that bind the eternal, unchangeable knower, the soul, to the psychological mind and the physical body.
Let's try to visualize this, because I was thinking about how to picture these forces since they are invisible, right?
Right.
I want to use the analogy of a CMYK printing press. You know, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black.
Oh, I like this.
Right, so when you look at a beautiful magazine cover, you see a million different colors and gradients and complex shapes. But if you put a microscope to the paper, there are literally only 3 or 4 colored dots layered on top of each other in different ratios. You never see the raw magenta ink out in the wild. You only see what it produces when it mixes with the other colors. The gunas feel like the 3 raw ink colors of human reality.
I absolutely love that. You never interact with pure raw rajas or pure sattva. You only experience the composite image they print out in your brain. And we call that composite image a mood or a desire or a personality.
Exactly. So let's look at the first strand, the first raw color of ink. This is sattva. Now, reading the text, sattva sounds like the absolute ultimate goal.
Oh, for sure.
Krishna describes it as pure, luminous, and free from disease or harm. Shankaracharya compares its illuminating nature to a crystal stone. It allows knowledge and clarity to just shine right through.
Yeah.
So naturally, the modern mind thinks, awesome, hook me up to an IV of sattva. That's enlightenment.
And it is undeniably the highest, most refined of the 3. But, and this is the massive, incredibly counterintuitive, but in the Gita, it is still a rope. It still binds the soul.
This is wild to me. Krishna says it binds the embodied soul through attachment to happiness and attachment to knowledge. And this is where my brain starts short-circuiting again.
I completely get that.
How on earth can happiness and knowledge be bad things? Like, how do they bind you?
To understand this trap, we really have to look closely at Shankaracharya's insight into the word nescience. Nescience just means ignorance. But sattva creates a very refined, highly polished form of ignorance.
Okay, how so?
Well, Shankaracharya points out that happiness, like the actual feeling of joy or tranquility, is an object of experience. It is the modification of your internal organ, your mind. It is a chemical and psychological event happening to you.
Right.
But what sattva does is create this really subtle illusion. It makes the eternal witnessing self look at that temporary feeling of happiness and proudly declare, I am happy.
Oh, so it creates an identity out of an emotion.
Precisely. It wrongly attaches a fleeting temporary state to the eternal subject. The self, in its true unmanifested nature, doesn't experience happiness as a passing emotion. It is absolute bliss. It is thy baseline reality.
Right.
But sattva makes you addicted to the emotional experience of happiness. It makes you chase the feeling of tranquility or the feeling of being intellectually sharp or the feeling of spiritual superiority.
I have to share a somewhat embarrassing personal story here because I think this perfectly illustrates the trap of sattva.
Oh, please do.
So a few years ago, I spent a whole weekend building houses for a charity. I woke up at dawn, I did hard physical labor for free and helped a family in need, and I felt so incredibly serene.
Yeah.
I thought, this is it. I am operating out of pure, selfless sattva. I was floating on a cloud of my own goodness.
A classic sattvic high.
Exactly. But then Sunday night rolls around.
Yeah.
And the charity posts this massive photo album of the weekend on their Instagram. I eagerly scroll through all 80 photos, and I am not in a single one.
No.
And suddenly my chest tightens. I start getting genuinely angry. I'm thinking, I worked harder than anyone else. Why didn't they tag me? Why didn't anyone see my sacrifice? And in a split second, that pure, beautiful, sattvic serenity just mutated into bitter, agitated resentment.
That is the absolute perfect anatomy of how sattva binds.
Right.
You weren't free. You were attached to the identity of being the good, selfless person. You were completely addicted to the spiritual high of your own knowledge and virtue. And the very moment that identity wasn't externally validated, the rope yanked you right back down into the mud.
It's terrifying. Sattva is like a perfectly clean, spotless glass window in a mansion. It offers a beautiful, clear view of the outside world. It lets all the warm sunlight in. You can sit there and feel totally enlightened just looking through it. But at the end of the day, it is still a solid barrier keeping you trapped inside the house. You are attached to the view.
Yes.
Yes.
You sit in your quiet room meditating, feeling deeply peaceful, and the moment a dog barks outside, you completely lose your temper. Why? Because you are bound by your need to maintain that specific psychological condition.
It's so fragile.
It is. The ego subtly co-opts the spiritual journey. It says, I am the one who knows things. I am the tranquil one.
So the rope is made of fine silk, but it will still choke you.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at the second guna, the second color in our printing press. Rajas. Krishna describes rajas as the very nature of passion, and Shankaracharya says it has a coloring effect, like an ochre pigment. It actively dyes the mind.
Yes.
It is born of two distinct mechanisms, according to the text. Hankering, which is this burning, thirsty longing for things you don't have yet, and attachment, which is desperately clinging to the things you already possess.
Notice the psychological tension there. Hankering constantly pulls your consciousness into the future, towards what you lack, while attachment glues your consciousness to the past, terrified of losing what you have.
So you're being pulled in two directions at once.
Right. And between those two forces, Rajas completely annihilates your ability to exist peacefully in the present moment.
Krishna says Rajas binds the embodied soul through attachment to action. And I actually want to challenge this a bit, or at least play devil's advocate.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because in our modern capitalist society, action is the ultimate virtue. Like, we worship the grind, hustle culture, crushing your goals, building an empire. This is what we are explicitly taught gives life meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
So how does Krishna view this constant driving need for action?
What's fascinating here is that Krishna is not condemning the physical movement of the body. I mean, you have to eat, you have to work, you have to maintain society. He is diagnosing the underlying psychological state that is driving the movement.
Okay, so it's the motive, not the movement.
Exactly. Raja's action is always, unequivocally, driven by a deeply rooted sense of lack. You are acting because you believe that achieving the goal will finally make you whole.
Once I get the promotion, then my life really starts. Then I can finally relax.
Exactly. But the cruel trick of Rajas is that it is a treadmill with absolutely no off switch. By its very definition, it creates an unquenchable thirst.
Right.
The dopamine hit of achieving the goal lasts for, what, about 10 minutes? And the moment you get the promotion, the Rajasic mind instantly shifts its hankering to the next tier, the next salary bracket, the next square footage on a house.
It never ends.
Never. It binds you by making you fundamentally believe your salvation lies in the very next acquisition. You become a slave to your own restless desires. You literally cannot sit still because your nervous system is dyed with this ochre pigment of agitated craving.
Wow. So Sattva binds you to the meditation cushion with spiritual pride, and Rajas binds you to the office, working 80-hour weeks, terrified of losing your status and desperate for more.
You're starting to see the trap.
Yeah, clearly. And that leaves us with the third guna, the final color, Tamas.
Tamas is the heavy one, the dense black ink. The text describes it as being born directly of ignorance. While Sattva illuminates and Rajas activates, Tamas simply deludes. It throws a thick, heavy blanket over all embodied beings.
The binding mechanism of Tamas is described as inadvertence, laziness, and sleep. And, Shankaracharya has a really specific definition of inadvertence here that I found striking.
What is it?
He defines it as the non-performance of a duty on hand, which means it's not just a casual mistake or, oops, I forgot. It's active negligence.
Yes, it is the fundamental refusal to engage with reality. If Rajas is frantically running on the treadmill, Tamas is refusing to get out of bed while the mattress is literally on fire.
That is a terrifying image.
It is inertia. It is darkness. And mechanically, it's fascinating how Tamas operates as a veil. Remember that beautiful clear glass window of Sattva we talked about?
Yeah.
Tamas is when you pull the heavy blackout curtains completely shut. It suppresses the illumination of Sattva, and it smothers the active, passionate energy of Rajas. It just drags your consciousness down into numbness and complete apathy.
I think we all intimately know that feeling. It's not just physical tiredness.
No, not at all.
It's that moment when you have a critical deadline, you should care, the consequences are severe, but there is this heavy, dark, psychological gravity pulling you toward the couch to scroll mindlessly on your phone for 3 hours.
Doom scrolling is pure Tamas.
Exactly. And that isn't just you being a quote-unquote bad person. That is the mechanism of Tamas operating your nervous system.
And Shankaracharya reminds us forcefully that this is a cosmic force expressing itself locally in your brain. Tamas binds you by systematically robbing you of your discrimination. You lose the ability to tell right from wrong, useful from useless, healthy from toxic. You just sink into a stupor to avoid the friction of existence.
So we have the illuminating trap of Sattva, the restless treadmill of Rajas, and the heavy blackout curtain of Tamas. And Chapter 14 doesn't just list them as these static, separate categories. It describes how they constantly interact.
Right, the battlefield.
Exactly. Which brings us to the internal tug-of-war, because they are never at peace. They are in a state of constant dynamic warfare for dominance over your consciousness.
It's an internal war zone.
Krishna explicitly maps out this battleground. He says Sattva increases by subduing Rajas and Tamas. Rajas overpower Sattva and Tamas dominates Sattva and Rajas. It is a relentless zero-sum game inside your neurology.
It is.
So, listener, here's your second listening prompt. Notice the explanation of how these forces bind human nature and dictate our actions. I want you to think about how your own moods shift throughout a single high-stress workday.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to frame it.
Because it's not random, it is this exact mechanical shift of the three gunas fighting for the steering wheel.
Let's actually walk through that specific scenario because it makes the abstract philosophy incredibly tangible.
Let's do it.
Let's trace a person's behavior through a typical stressful day. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. You hit snooze 3 times. Your body feels like lead, your brain is foggy, and you actively resent the concept of waking up. What is running the show?
Well, that is pure Tamas. The blackout curtains are shut tight.
Right. Tamas is dominant. But then reality hits. You realize you have a massive presentation at 9 a.m., and suddenly a jolt of adrenaline hits your system. You jump out of bed, you throw down an espresso, your mind starts racing through everything that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
You get in the car and cut someone off in traffic because they are moving too slowly.
Okay, so Raja's just violently subdued Tamas. The desire to succeed and the fear of failure just completely hijacked the system.
Exactly. You're agitated, you're hyper-focused on the goal, and you're looking at everyone as either an obstacle or an asset.
Classic Rajas.
Right. So you get to work, you crush the presentation, the boss praises you. You get home at 7 p.m., the house is completely quiet, you pour a cup of tea, and you sit on the back porch.
The calm after the storm.
For about 20 minutes, the anxiety completely evaporates. You look at the trees, you feel this profound sense of gratitude for your life, and everything seems perfectly clear and harmonious.
So Sattva has finally overpowered Rajas. The dirt has settled to the bottom of the lake, and the water is clear again.
Until your phone buzzes with a passive-aggressive email from a coworker, and the cycle violently resets. The dominant guna dictates your entire perception of reality in that specific moment.
It's honestly exhausting just thinking about it. Krishna actually gives us a diagnostic checklist to know which guna is currently winning the war.
Yes, the signs.
When Sattva is rising, he says, illumination and knowledge radiate through all the doors of the body. And by the doors, he means our sense organs.
Shankaracharya elaborates beautifully on this. When Sattva is dominant, your hearing, your seeing, your intellect, they become incredibly sharp and objective.
Like high-definition reality.
Exactly. You aren't projecting your insecurities onto what you see. The senses act as clean, frictionless instruments. You simply perceive reality without distortion.
And when Rajas takes over, I don't want to just read the list. Based on our hustle culture analogy, the symptoms have to be related to, like, an insatiable appetite, right?
Absolutely.
The text lists avarice, constant movement, undertaking strenuous actions, and unrest.
Yes. When Rajas rules, the mind is utterly incapable of staying in the present moment. The doors of the senses are no longer just neutrally observing, they are aggressively hunting.
What can I get out of this?
Precisely. What can I extract from this situation? How can I leverage this conversation to my advantage? It creates a profound internal itch.
And when Tamas rises, it's the opposite of hunting. It's hiding.
Right.
The symptoms are extreme non-discrimination, inactivity, inadvertence, and delusion.
The doors of the senses are basically slammed shut and barricaded. The intellect is thick with fog. You make terrible self-destructive decisions, not because you are passionately driven like in Rajas, but because you literally cannot foresee the consequences of your actions. You just seek unconsciousness.
It is staggering how clinically precise this is. It's a behavioral psychology evaluation written millennia before Freud or Jung even existed.
It really is.
But Krishna doesn't let us stay just in the realm of psychology. He dramatically elevates the stakes to a cosmic existential level. He talks about the consequences of these gunas, not just in how you spend your Tuesday, but in the transition of death and rebirth.
This is where the metaphysical weight of the Gita is fully revealed.
What happens when a person dies under the heavy influence of each specific guna?
In this Vedic tradition, physical death is not a hard stop. It is simply a transition point for the subtle body. And the trajectory of that transition is determined entirely by the momentum of the mind.
Let's break that down because I want to make sure I really understand the mechanism here. If you die while Sattva is predominant, the text says the soul goes higher up to the spotless worlds of those who know the highest.
The realms of the gods.
Right, the realms of the gods. The result is purity.
Let's look at the physics of this. Rather than viewing it as some religious reward system, it's not a judgmental deity sitting on a cloud handing out gold stars. It is spiritual gravity.
Spiritual gravity, I like that.
Like attracts like. If your consciousness has been refined, purified, and detached through a lifetime of cultivating sattva, your subtle, energetic body is incredibly light.
Okay.
When the dense physical body drops away at death, that lightness naturally, effortlessly gravitates towards planes of existence that are similarly subtle, pure, and luminous. You are drawn to an environment that matches your internal frequency.
Okay, what if you die while Rajas is running the show? The text says the soul is born in the middle among humans who are attached to activity. The result is sorrow and endless action.
Again, it's sheer momentum. If your mind is completely obsessed with unfinished projects, achieving social status, settling grudges, and acquiring wealth, that heavy, agitated, earthly desire literally anchors your subtle body to the earthly plane.
So you just bounce right back?
You are drawn right back into the human realm, right back onto the treadmill of action, because the physical world is the only environment where your unfulfilled material desires can attempt to find expression. The momentum of your craving slingshots you back to the place of craving.
And finally, death in Tamas. Krishna says the soul goes down, bored among stupid species, referring to animals or lower life forms. The result is total ignorance.
If a human life has been spent actively avoiding consciousness, cultivating numbness, living in delusion, and acting entirely on base instincts without ever utilizing the higher intellect, well, the trajectory of that consciousness is downward.
It's regressing.
It naturally gravitates toward biological forms where the higher intellect is anatomically veiled, where survival and instinct are the only operating principles. The universe simply accommodates the soul's deep desire to remain in the dark.
So what does this all mean? To synthesize all of this, it creates an incredible sense of urgency for me. The momentum of our current state of mind literally dictates our future trajectory.
That absolutely does.
The thoughts I am quietly entertaining right now, the petty resentments I am harboring, the mood I am allowing to dominate my morning, these aren't just passing clouds. They are building a vector.
A vector, yes.
They are constructing the energetic vehicle that will carry my consciousness forward. Present moment self-awareness isn't just a nice, trendy mindfulness practice to, lower my blood pressure. It is absolutely critical for the survival and trajectory of the soul.
That is the exact burning urgency Krishna is trying to instill in his student, Arjuna. You are weaving your future reality strand by strand, rope by rope, in every single microscopic moment of choice.
Okay, but this brings us to a terrifying realization. If I follow this logic to its end, even if I spend my whole life perfectly cultivating sattva, meditating daily, doing charity work, and I go to the highest, most luminous worlds of the gods, I am still bound.
Yes, you are.
Sattva is still a rope. I am just sitting in a much nicer, prettier prison cell with a better view. How do we actually win this game?
You don't win the game by playing it better than everyone else.
Yeah.
You win by stepping off the board entirely.
Yeah. Which brings us to the climax of the teaching. And this is your third listening prompt for today. Listen carefully to how Krishna says we can actually transcend these forces to achieve true liberation. How do we slip the ropes?
The mechanism of liberation is laid out beautifully in verse 19.
Right. Krishna says that freedom begins when the witness sees that none other than the qualities themselves are the agents of action. The soul must realize it is fundamentally superior to the gunas.
This is the cognitive turning point of the entire spiritual path. Up until now, we've been deeply identifying with the colors of the ink.
Right. I am happy, I am angry.
Exactly. When Rajas makes our heart race with anger, we say, I am angry. When Sattva makes us peaceful, we say, I am peaceful. Verse 19 demands a radical severing of that identification.
How do you do that?
You must step back and realize, I am not angry. The force of Rajas is currently interacting with a Rajasic trigger in my environment. My mind, which is made of matter, is displaying the chemical symptom of anger. I, the pure consciousness, am merely witnessing this interaction of matter.
I want to find a really mechanical metaphor for this. The movie and the screen analogy is used a lot, but let's look at it like being in a hyper-realistic VR simulation.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. So you have the VR headset on, you're playing a horror game, and a monster jumps out at you. Your actual physical heart rate spikes. You start sweating. Your body is reacting to the pixels as if they are real life.
Because your brain thinks it's real.
Exactly. But if, in that exact moment of terror, you remember, oh wait, I have a headset strapped to my face, I'm sitting safely in my living room, the physiological reaction starts to drop.
The illusion breaks.
The monster is still on the screen, the pixels are still doing their thing, but you have severed the false identification.
That is a brilliant modern equivalent of Shankaracharya's philosophy.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, bondage is the absurd superimposition of the VR game onto your actual identity. It is screaming, "Help, I'm being eaten." Liberation is not defeating the monster in the game. Liberation is remembering the headset. It is the realization that the self is just the silent witness. The gunas act upon the gunas. Matter acts upon matter. The spirit remains utterly untouched in the living room.
But Arjuna is a warrior. He's a highly practical guy standing in the middle of a literal battlefield. He hears this high-level abstract philosophy and immediately wants to know what it looks like on the ground in the dirt.
Of course he does.
So he asks 3 incredibly practical questions. He asks, what are the signs of someone who has actually transcended the gunas? What is their behavior like? And practically, how do they do it?
I love Arjuna's pragmatism. He is essentially saying, okay, Krishna, point this person out to me. How do I spot a Gunatita 1 who has gone beyond the gunas walking down the street?
Krishna's answer is profound and honestly a little challenging. He lists the signs and the behavior. He says the Gunatita does not dislike illumination, activity, or delusion when they appear, nor do they long for them when they disappear.
Notice what is explicitly not said there. He doesn't say the Gunatita never experiences delusion or activity.
Right. They aren't dead.
The gunas are still operating the physical apparatus. The physical brain still gets tired and tamasic. The nervous system still has to solve complex rajasic problems. The intellect still experiences sattvic clarity.
So what's the difference?
The difference is entirely in their internal relationship to those states. They don't panic when Tamas rolls in, and they don't cling to Sattva when it fades.
Right. Krishna says they sit like one indifferent, undisturbed by the gunas, knowing the qualities alone act. They possess this massive, unshakable equanimity. They are the same in sorrow and happiness.
Absolute balance.
And here is the detail that always trips me up. They treat a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold completely equally. They are steady in honor and dishonor toward friend and foe.
It sounds incredibly alien to the modern mind, doesn't it? Treating a clod of dirt the same as a bar of gold. Treating your best friend the same as your bitter enemy.
Honestly, it sounds like a recipe for societal collapse. I'm just going to push back on this. If I don't value my paycheck over a lump of dirt, I can't feed my kids.
Fair point.
If I treat my spouse the same way I treat someone who actively wants to harm me, I'm a terrible partner. To the Rajasic mind, this sounds like clinical depression or total sociopathy. How does a Gunatita actually function in human society?
That is the most common and most important objection to this philosophy. We really have to distinguish between instrumental value and intrinsic value.
Okay, explain that.
The Gunatita isn't stupid. They know that in the marketplace, gold buys food and dirt doesn't. They know how to play the game of the world. They will use the gold to feed their family.
Right.
But they treat them equally in terms of their intrinsic ability to provide fulfillment. The Gunatita knows that a bar of gold cannot make their soul 1 ounce more complete, and a lump of dirt cannot diminish their true nature.
Ah, okay, that is a massive distinction.
As for friend and foe, it's not that they stop loving their family. It's that their love is no longer a rajasic transaction.
A transaction.
Right. A normal person loves their friend because the friend makes them feel good, and hates their enemy because the enemy threatens their ego. The Gunatita sees the exact same pure spirit, the Purusha, residing in both the friend and the enemy.
Wow.
The bodies and minds, the gunas, are acting differently, but the core is the same. Their equanimity comes from seeing reality as it actually is, rather than how it affects their personal ego.
That makes so much more sense. They aren't numb. They are just entirely rooted in reality. Okay, that answers the signs and the behavior. But Arjuna's third question is the most crucial. How?
$1 million question.
How does one actually transcend these biological and psychological ropes? It's easy to say, just remember you're wearing a VR headset, but when the game is really scary or really pleasurable, the brain gets sucked right back in. What is the ultimate practical solution?
Krishna's answer here is a massive paradigm shift. It bridges the gap between pure, cold, analytical philosophy and deep, warm, visceral devotion.
What does he say?
He says, "He who serves me through the unswerving yog of devotion qualifies for becoming Brahman."
Bhakti Yoga, devotion. Honestly, this always feels like a sudden left turn to me. We've been doing all this highly intellectual, clinical dismantling of the mind's mechanics, and suddenly the ultimate answer is just Surrender and devotion.
It feels like a left turn until you look at the psychological mechanism of why it works. Shankaracharya unpacks this beautifully. The gunas belong to Prakriti, to Maya, the cosmic illusion, and who is the master of Maya, Bhagavan, the Supreme.
Okay.
The illusion is his divine power. You cannot fight the illusion on its own level using the tools of the illusion.
You can't use rajas to defeat rajas.
Exactly. Trying to fight your ego with your ego is like trying to lift yourself off the ground by pulling on your own shoelaces.
Yeah.
It violates the laws of physics. The ego is the very knot that ties the spirit to the gunas.
So how do you untie a knot that is made of yourself?
You have to appeal to something outside the system. You need a skyhook.
So how does devotion mechanically act as that skyhook? How does the act of dedicating an action to an external ideal rewire the brain?
Think about what rajasic action is. It is action driven by the desire for personal reward. I do this, so I get that. The dopamine loop is entirely tied to personal aggrandizement.
Right.
Devotion true, unswerving surrender mechanically hacks that loop. When you perform an action completely devoted to the Supreme, you are saying, I am doing this work, but the results belong entirely to you. You strip the action of its selfish motive.
You remove the fuel of the ego.
Yes. You neuroplastically rewire your brain to stop obsessing over the outcome. You are acknowledging, I, the limited individual, cannot think my way out of this trap. I surrender to the infinite.
That's powerful.
And Krishna explains exactly why this works, because Bhagavan is the abode of Brahman, the indestructible, immutable, eternal, absolute bliss. By completely devoting and aiming your mind at the Supreme, your mind begins to take on the qualities of the Supreme.
It expands.
It expands to become infinite. And when the mind becomes infinite, the finite, brittle ropes of the gunas simply snap under the pressure.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to bring this entirely down to earth. Let's take this ancient cosmic mechanism of devotion and the three gunas and apply it directly to the listener's life right now.
Let's do it.
Because the reality is, most of us listening to this are not living in Himalayan caves practicing unswerving devotion 24/7. We are commuting, we have mortgages, we have screaming toddlers, and we have smartphones designed to exploit our rajas.
Very true.
How does knowing about the three gunas actually help us at 2:0 p.m. on a Tuesday?
Because it is the most powerful tool I have ever encountered for both profound self-compassion and ruthless self-discipline.
Explain that duality. How does it give us self-compassion?
Think about the sheer volume of time we spend violently judging our own mental states. I'm so lazy today, I'm worthless. I'm so incredibly anxious, I must be broken.
We beat ourselves up endlessly.
We take the shifting weather patterns of our minds incredibly personally. We identify with them as deep moral failings. But if you deeply understand the mechanics of the gunas, you realize that when you are hit with a wave of lethargy, it isn't you being fundamentally flawed.
It's just Tamas.
It is simply a dense cloud of tamas passing through the physical and mental apparatus. It is just a weather pattern.
Oh, wow. So instead of going into a shame spiral over our laziness, our tamas, or beating ourselves up over our frantic burnout from overworking our rajas, we can step back and view them objectively. We can just look at the dashboard and say, heavy tamas in the system today, the engine is running sluggish.
Exactly. And that objective observation brings us to the self-discipline part. This raises an important question for anyone attempting this. How do you actually practice being the witness in the heat of the moment? Shankaracharya insists that self-knowledge is not about accumulating more facts. You don't need to read 50 more books on Vedic philosophy to get it. Self-knowledge is the active, real-time elimination of the false superimposition. It is the moment-to-moment practice of unidentifying.
So practically speaking, let's say I'm driving and someone cuts me off and I feel that massive, violent surge of road rage, that toxic spike of rajas and tamas mixing together.
Very common occurrence.
My practice in that moment is to catch the thought before it fully forms, to insert just a microsecond of space between the external trigger and my internal reaction, to observe it and say, there is a spike of anger arising in the field of the mind. The gunas of my body are reacting to the gunas of that car. I am the silent observer of this chemical reaction.
Yes. And here's the magic of that microsecond of space. Just by objectively observing the emotion, you deprive it of its primary fuel source.
Your identity.
Exactly. The gunas only have power over you when you lend them your identity. When you scream, I am so angry, you are pouring all of your vital spiritual energy into the rajas, and it explodes into destructive action.
Yeah.
But when you quietly note, anger is present in the system, you withdraw your energy. The rajas flares up, it burns through its chemical momentum, and then it simply fades away, leaving you entirely untouched.
That is profound. It shifts the entire paradigm of personal growth. It's no longer about this toxic positivity of trying to force yourself to be happy and productive all the time, because even that is just a subtle clinging to sattva.
Exactly.
It's about being deeply, unshakably okay, regardless of which guna is currently passing through the weather system of your mind.
That is the exact state of the Gunatita.
But I do have one final technical question before we wrap this up. I want to make sure I understand the concept of Prarabdha karma, which you mentioned briefly earlier.
Yes. Prarabdha karma.
If a Gunatita has completely realized they are the screen and not the movie, why doesn't their body just instantly drop dead? Like, why do they keep walking around and interacting with the world if they've severed the ropes? For the listener who hasn't studied this, what is the mechanism keeping them alive?
It's a really great question. Prarabdha karma refers to the portion of your past actions, your past karma, that has already begun to bear fruit in this current lifetime.
Okay.
The best way to explain it is the analogy of a spinning ceiling fan. When a person achieves ultimate realization and severs their identification with the gunas, it's like reaching over and pulling the plug on the fan. The electricity, the egoic desire generating new karma is completely cut off.
But the blades don't stop instantly.
Exactly. The fan continues to spin for a while purely due to its past momentum. The Gunatita's physical body and mind will continue to operate, to experience illness, to interact with society, playing out the momentum of the karma that birthed that specific body.
That makes perfect sense.
But the person inside knows the power is cut. They are just quietly watching the blades slow down until the body eventually drops and they merge completely with the infinite.
What an incredibly liberating way to view the rest of your life, just watching the blades spin down.
Truly.
Okay, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. From the unmanifested cosmic womb of Prakriti, all the way down to the gritty neurochemical reality of our daily moods and road rage.
It's a massive journey.
To distill this entire deep dive down into a single core takeaway for you today, it is this. Freedom comes when we rise above the forces of nature and realize the self.
Absolutely.
We are not the turbulent, shifting forces of our minds. We are not the heavy exhaustion of Tamas. We are not the frantic anxiety of Rajas. And we are not even the serene, luminous clarity of Sattva. We are the silent, eternal witness observing them all.
The untouched screen upon which the chaotic movie of reality is playing.
Exactly. Before we go, a quick reminder. If this deep dive sparked a realization for you, or if it helped you understand a pattern in your own behavior, please make sure to subscribe to the Simplified Awakening channel.
And leave a like.
Yes, hit the like button and drop down into the comments right now. I genuinely want to know, which of the three Gunasattva, Rajas, or Tamas do you feel most influenced by today? Be honest. We've all got our struggles, and identifying the dominant ink color is the very first step to stepping out of the printing press.
It is usually a constantly shifting mix, but simply naming the dominant force is how you begin to cultivate the witness.
Now, this journey through the Gita is far from over. Next time, we are diving into Chapter 15, which is called Purusha Yoga, or the Supreme Person.
Oh, that is a fantastic chapter.
And if you thought the psychology and the physics in this chapter were intense, wait until we get to the visual imagery in the next one. Krishna is going to describe human reality as a massive, inverted tree of the world, with its roots reaching upward to the heavens and its branches growing downward into our material reality.
The imagery of the upside-down tree is one of the most powerful and complex symbols in all of Eastern philosophy. It completely flips our understanding of where we come from.
It is a mind-bending metaphor for how we get entangled in the world, and more importantly, the specific acts we need to use to cut ourselves free. You will absolutely not want to miss it.
I cannot wait to unpack that with you.
But to leave you today, I want to circle all the way back to our opening hook. We talked about how you aren't the captain steering the ship, and how these invisible chemical and spiritual forces, the gunas, are dictating your thoughts and actions.
Right.
We've spent this entire time pulling apart the mechanics of the mind, identifying the ropes, but I want to leave you with a final, highly provocative thought to mull over based on the text we just explored.
True.
If the eternal self is entirely untouched by happiness, entirely untouched by sorrow, and entirely untouched by action, and if all of these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are literally just the gunas of nature interacting with other gunas of nature, then who is the you that is actually listening to this deep dive right now?
That is the question, isn't it?
We'll see you next time.